Oh, hello, Andy Brassel.
Oh, Petey.
What a game that was. Manchester United 3, Newcastle 2. Real topsy-turvy stuff. More topsy than turvy when it came to Manchester United and Newcastle. But Andy, you were pulled off the subs bench. You didn't even know you were doing this show tonight. So you were very luckily watching this football match.
No, that's right. And I was watching two football matches at once, as
Right.
is very much my brand. And funnily enough, the other game I was watching, I was already settled in for Reims versus Marseille. And I've always thought Marseille and Newcastle are quite comparable.
Quite similar. Yeah, I could have that.
Yeah, like so fervently followed. It's the club's the heart and soul of the city, and really good at home and absolute trash away this season as well. Which and as
worth
Marseille,
the season ticket.
Yeah, that's right. As Marseille bumbled and stumbled their way to a defeat that pretty much made it impossible for them to qualify for Europe this season. Of course, it wasn't quite that bad for Newcastle, but they do find new and spectacular ways to let games slip. I mean, this wasn't quite a Crystal Palace away, but it was
No.
You know, it was a great advert for the Premier League, a great advert for fun, not a great advert for all-round competence, was it really?
Yeah, I mean, each and every player had a little bit of the recently tranquilised bear about them at times. It was, and for Newcastle, it was very much right in front of goal. I mean, Sean Longstaff, he is the last person you want in front of goal at any point, isn't it, Andy?
Well, because he scored a few recently, you expect when he scores his next goal, someone will come out and say what they said about Jacob Murphy, like he's the best finisher at the club. It's
right.
I mean, that sort of thing, when it was in the Steve Bruce era, that didn't get fact-checked, did it?
No,
Whereas now,
it really didn't. No.
Even if Longstaff has scored a few recently, I don't think anyone could claim that with a straight face, could they?
Yeah. Well, Man United do move level with Newcastle on 57 points after a 3-2 victory. The busiest summed up the season, like you say, on both sides of the ledger. Kobe Mainoo with a little smasher. Diallo with one hell of a loose... What would you call it? Just a smash, really, I suppose. And no one picking up at the end edge of the box and really, really hit hard. And I guess the other sort of notable goal was Lewis Hall's absolute left-footed beauty that he scored before at Man United, I think, right at the death, which kind of made Newcastle give them a little bit of false hope that they were going to turn, so at least steal 1 point from the situation. Newcastle, the story of the game it was very chaotic. It was very loosey-goosey. And Newcastle United, I was quite excited because Newcastle had quite a lot of chances. Anthony Gordon scored his 11th goal of the season, which seems kind of low. He seems to have scored every week since year dot, since he came back from his fine international tournament performance. But yeah, Newcastle had a lot of chances, but Man United were just a bit more clinical, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean... I still can't work out how United won that, and I'm sure I'm going to have to think about it a bit more over the next day or two before we get to the final day of the Premier League season. But I think when we're always looking for tactical patterns and all that sort of stuff when watching football, we don't really talk about luck that much, because I think as people who speak about the game for a living, we as a community think that makes us sound a bit stupid, whereas the reality is I think you have to talk about that sometimes. I did think what you were saying about the goal by Ahmad, not only was it a brilliant goal, it was a game changer, because at that point Newcastle had equalised. They're really getting on top of the game. It felt like a matter of time until they'd scored again, and that really seemed to knock the stuffing out of them. And I think full credit to United, they really regrouped and they defended a lot better collectively after that. So Newcastle had chances after that, but not as many chances as they'd had, A, in the first half, and B, in the bit between half-time and when Ahmad scored the goal. Obviously, one of those they did actually put away through Anthony Gordon. So that was the moment that really changed the game. So I was really against the run of play that Ahmad goal, and as you say, such a brilliant goal as well.
Speaking of difference making, obviously Bruno Fernandes was back after missing the last 2 games. There have been reports of that man Fernandes leaving the club. He has flattered to deceive at certain times this season, but he is he at the end of the day he is the best lead they've got. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, well, he's probably their best player. That's definitely fair to say. I guess that's the thing, because he has been the captain of Manchester United for a lot of what has been a very bad period.
Yeah,
a lot of negative stuff has stuck to him, and I don't think that's entirely fair. Like him gobbing off at his teammates, moaning at the referee all the time. None of that matters if he's having like the first 6 to 12 months that he had at Manchester United.
Yeah.
I think really he has resisted market forces for a remarkably long time, because, as we've discussed endlessly, it seems on the pod sometimes, players do not get better at Manchester United. They just get worse, and he has largely resisted that. And I guess if you're talking about a rebuild and you're talking about generating money for a rebuild, if that's what's necessary, he's one of the few assets that's probably saleable for a decent chunk of change, unless we're talking about chipping into to young players, into Kobe Mainu, which they're definitely not gonna do. But this was definitely good Bruno Fernandes. Obviously, him being the great player that he is, he will go off and have a brilliant Euros for Portugal and make you wonder what all the low bits of the last season were about.
I mean, we had Casemiro at the back with Johnny Evans. Obviously, a lot has been said and been made of his performances of late. But can we put the Duolingo sound effect in at this point when I say that he had a pretty good first half? Because it doesn't sound like a sentence that should make sense, if you know what I mean, this season. He has been a completely different footballer to what we expected, I think. Even at his... Was he 31 now? Even at his age, I think it's been a very, very strange and bizarre season for a player who you've obviously watched for your entire journalistic career, Andy.
Yeah, it feels like that sometimes. He feels older than 31, like you say. Yeah, look, I thought he did pretty well tonight. I think that was probably aided a bit by the fact that Alexander Isak wasn't really at it. He didn't really look completely fit, which I think was a big deciding factor in the game. But Casemiro really stuck to it. I thought he was really committed. And as I said on the Ramble on Monday, I feel like some of the criticisms of him, obviously he's not been good since he's gone to centre-back. He's not had a particularly good season either. But some of the criticisms that he's received, I think, have been a bit over the top and a bit unreasonable, and not taken into account that he's playing in a position that's not his own. You know, of course, he's not the only United player to be exposed in that sense. You've had Amrabat playing left back for most of the time, not really with the chance to prove that he's good enough to be for United or otherwise. So I think you've got to cut him a bit of slack. But in terms of being dogged and being committed, I thought he was pretty good in both halves, to be honest. And he was a part of, after Ahmad gave them the lead again, just keeping Newcastle at bay for a lot of that.
I mean, I have to say, Andy, the main disappointment for me was not only the opportunity for Ten Hag to settle some scores at the end of the match with his microphone in the stadium, which, you know, he basically just did a bit of rabble-rousing, sort of saying, you know, we're going to, you know, go and have a crack at the cup, or rather the coupe, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. He could have gone out and just absolutely laid into to everyone from the top to the bottom of the club, Kendrick Lamar style. He could have done so much. I mean, he was perhaps a little bit distracted or a little bit overheating, because it was 15 degrees in Manchester and he's wearing a three-piece suit, Andy. I'm not having this. That's surely will have adjusted to the climate at this point. People talk about footballers not adjusting to the culture, but I mean, 15 degrees, that's as good as you're going to get. Why are you wearing a three-piece?
Three pieces are good for one type of person, and that's Rupert the Bear. Well, he's not a person, he's a bear, isn't he? I think...
Bears, not people. Andy Brassard of The Guardian.
There we go, there's our title. I think the interesting thing about Phil Brown.
The
interesting thing
Throw
about
him
Eric
in.
Ten
Brilliant.
Hag
Phil Brown
it
Bear.
does come off, but it does come off as really Phil Brown,
Bit
doesn't
Phil
it?
Brownie, yeah, doing a bit of.
It was just a bit. And another thing, while I'm up there, all those who dissed me, I told you you'd be sorry. Have some of that. You do that when you've won something. You do that when, not just a football match, but not when you're Manchester United and you're still in 8th place in the Premier League. And you're very likely, it's not in your hands, and you're very likely to get beaten by your rivals, put in your place by your rivals in the FA Cup final.
I mean, especially because this match didn't really sort of change the fact that Newcastle United, in all likelihood, will finish higher than Man United for the first time ever in the Premier League, which is a lovely little stat that you sort of go, yeah, of course that's the case. It'd be ridiculous not to be.
Yeah, and you know what? I feel as a football community, we don't use that Kevin Keegan clip enough. So
right, okay. Now
this is our opportunity, really, isn't it? Nearly
it's a bit
20
of an open
years
goal,
on.
really, isn't it? Yeah. It's a
I
long
think it
staff
should be
in
done.
the 6-yard box esque. Speaking of Newcastle United, watching that match, I did sort of think, good God, like, if I give you these players, Andy, and I'm looking at like Dubravka, Longstaff, Almiron, they're not going to be there next season, are they?
Well, they shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be, or they shouldn't need to be. But you get the sort of sense that in any sort of sane world, Newcastle should be past that level. But unfortunately, they've got limitations that they, the purse strings have been tightened outside of their own kind of situation. So
you're right, Donny. It puts where they're at into perspective, I think, and the season into perspective. Anyone who doesn't think Eddie Howe hasn't done a brilliant job this season is out of their minds. I think when you look at everything that's happened, the squad, the injury list, if they were finishing like 12th, 13th, I would think that was par. That they're still in with a shout of the Europa League / or more likely Conference League. And Conference League, everyone's saying what step... everyone's saying what step down that would be. I can't think of a football city in England, in Britain, that would be more grateful to win the Conference League than Newcastle.
Yeah.
I mean, it really would. It would be an incredible thing to happen. You look at the way Rome responded to Mourinho and company winning the first one. That would be that times 1,000. I think it would be amazing.
And even with the constraints and the strains and the injuries that the Premier League season and obviously post-international tournament gives you in 2025-26, sorry, 2024-25, just skipping ahead there. But you do sort of think that they could handle that. I know there's a lot of travel, and I know, but there aren't quite as many games, and you sort of think they could probably handle a pretty tidy tilted competition like that. And like you say, Newcastle would be, as a city, would absolutely be bouncing on nights like that. Yeah, and one of your colleagues who'd have Thursday night European football 20 minutes. Well, I mean, and Andy, I was going to mention Andy's jiggling wallet as well, but I mean, you were very much you were fuming when Newcastle dropped out of the group of death in the Champions League. I felt for you, I really did. Yeah. Honestly, you know what? When occasionally I get Sunderland fans having a little poke at me on Twitter and saying how he's really pro Mags and all the rest of it. It's like, you have no idea how much I would like Sunderland to be in the Europa League / Conference League. Gateshead couldn't go up. Give us anything. Please, bring it all on. Send Middlesbrough in while you're at it. Like, the North East deserves so much better. Like, I've said it before on this podcast. Sunderland should be higher. They should be doing stuff, but they've just been let down frequently. And it all started with Martin O'Neill's spending back in the day. It all started on the Man United side. Obviously, you say they probably won't be fire sailing or garage sailing any of their youngsters, but because they've been. If there are any green shoots or good news stories this season, Amad Diallo scored a beauty, as we said. Kobe Manu opened the scoring as well. It has been an amazing not amazing. It has been an experience for these young footballers, because you can't say that Erik ten Hag hasn't at times been possibly forced into it. He seems to be a manager who now and again will entrust really talented youngsters with his football club and his job.
Yeah, I mean, of course, he comes from a background of doing that, both in the Bayern second team and in Ajax. But I guess the difference is just getting your head down and doing a job steadily and sensibly at a big Premier League club where there's lots of pressure. It's a little bit like Pochettino at Chelsea. Look, I'm not saying that they haven't made mistakes like Pochettino at Chelsea, even though it's going very well at the moment. Earlier in the season, he made mistakes, I think it's fair to say. I'm not saying Ten Hag hasn't made mistakes at Manchester United, but for you to do what needs to be done for the long term and have peace and quiet to do that, it's just not possible at that sort of club. It's not really possible to be judged objectively. Now, at this point, I think regardless of what happens on Sunday and regardless of what's happened in the cup final, I think most people would say that Erik ten Hag is not the coach to take Manchester United forward. And I think that's fair at this point. You know, he's had 2 seasons and that's been that. But you know, it doesn't mean that he's the worst coach in the world or anything like that.
Plenty of very good coaches have had a crack at the Man United job. They just have, and
exactly. And I think it's not easy to see where they'll go from here. Funnily enough, he'll find it easier to get a job than they will to fill his spot. I think, even though he's had a difficult kind of season. But what's been clear, and especially with what you were saying about him coming on the pitch at the end and all that sort of stuff, and the way that he's responded to journalists over recent months, it's clear that it's got in his head. And that can happen. I mean, I think you look at Rafa Benitez at various stages of title race at Liverpool, for example.
The current Spurs manager, he's gone insane with anger. But he's still keeping it under the wraps.
But you know what, Pete? It's nice to know us fans are listened to sometimes.
yeah, we've really got him. Do it more. Give him more needle, for crying out loud. Exactly. The big talking point from we will move on to the Brighton Chelsea match very briefly. But in the first half, the big talking point was the VAR challenge. Amrabat on Anthony Gordon in the first half didn't meet the high threshold. I mean, it looked like a penalty to me, and there was damage on his foot.
I agree. You know what saved him was basically the covering tackle, wasn't it? Was it Casemiro?
Yes, I believe it was. Yeah.
That made it look clean, and I think VAR's had a look at it and say, well, it's easy to miss. It's not heinous. Maybe he hasn't even made a challenge. I think it's easy to duck. If you know what I mean. So I could have understood if it had been given. I think that was fair enough. But I can also understand that it was let go. I just think there's maybe a little swell of indignation because I was at the Brighton game on Saturday and the fans were ever so angry with the match officials. Now, I can understand that as well because the referee, I thought, was a strange mix of overly fussy and missing a load of bigger calls. But that didn't really affect the way the game went. Just Newcastle are having, I suppose you could say, an expected drop in performance, really. I think it's difficult to be consistent after such a long season. I think you look at the team they've got out at the moment. I've got the same issue that they've got that they had 3 or 4 months ago where they've been forced to play the same 11 every week because they haven't really got a lot of fit players, which is a big issue for the next person to be the sporting director because I think there's a very, very tricky transfer window to be deciphered and to be plotted out in the next couple of months. But I just think, just as the fans are really annoyed with the ref at the weekend, and I could understand why that was. I don't think it really affected the course of the game. No. And with this, I can understand why it was let go. And it also wasn't the reason that Newcastle lost the game.
No, I guess they had more chances.
There was a lot in their control.
Yeah. And certainly at that point in the game when it actually took place. Well, it doesn't matter because VAR is going to be abolished because Wolves have basically started some kind of Premier League club vote on, the turkeys voting against Christmas. I don't really know what it is really. I mean, so Wolves have basically tabled a motion that VAR should be abolished, or certainly everyone should take a vote on it. Is this going to happen? I mean, we've installed the cameras now. I'm not pulling them wires out.
Oh no!
No, I just think that at this point at Old Trafford, they are helping it stay up. The wires are kind of supporting masts. The tripod is keeping one of the stands up for the cameras.
When you're talking about how long it's going to take to dig it all out, I don't think they're going to ask you to do it.
No, I'd have a go though.
I know you're very handy. Handy.
Harvest some of the bits for the studio.
I can see you with your pliers and your builder's bum.
Exactly. All right, well, let's move on to the next Premier League match also being played tonight. Brighton 1, Chelsea 2. Chelsea pulling clear of both Manchester United and Newcastle. They've sneaked up, haven't they, with their little form table, haven't they? Chelsea with a 2-1 win at Brighton. They're firmly sixth now, just 3 points behind Spurs. I mean, an incredible turnaround for a season. To be honest, I did predict, I think, to do quite well. And I was a bit annoyed, very annoyed, with how absolutely turgid they'd been at the start of the season. But I think myself and you, Andy, we've both said that maybe next season might be Chelsea's season. Maybe they're going to do something. You
take the credit for that, because I definitely didn't say that. I also definitely didn't see this uptick in form, which is enormous credit to them. There's enormous credit to Pochettino, and they've used the cups as a springboard, really, to find some sort of consistency. And when you think that Cole Palmer was like a month and a half ago all that was keeping them afloat, I mean, he's ascended to that level where not only is he excellent, but he makes everyone around him better as well. And they're a growing team, growing in a good direction. And look, I mean, they probably don't want this season to end. I know Pochettino was saying if we had like 6 weeks more season, we'd be maybe pushing towards the real top bit of the table. I guess he means the
Ifs
Champions
and
League.
nuts and all that. Good God.
Managers calling for more football.
Good God, that's rare, isn't it? Klopp will be getting back on the horse in a second to kick off. Reece James was sent off around 90 minutes after coming on. This was his second sub appearance after 5 months injured. Very Kieran Trippier. Like Kieran Trippier just came back after a fairly long absence, and he looked a bit punch drunk. Very enjoyable. I love a Kieran Trippier. I'd forgotten what football is kind of vibe. But yeah, Reece James, he was sent off 19 minutes after coming on. He's not had a great season, has he, bless him?
No, but you know what? I think it's maybe the best thing for England and Gareth Southgate. Not that I'd wish that on Reece James, especially since he's been out for a while. But like I was saying on Monday's Ramble, he was so convincing when he comes on. I just love him as a player anyway. He was so convincing when he came on at Nottingham Forest at the weekend. He played for 25 minutes, and I was like, yeah, get him on the plane. I wasn't even joking. You just look at him and you're like, I don't care that he's been injured for ages and that he'll probably get injured again in like a week and a half. I just love watching him play so much that please just bring him and Gareth figure it out.
I was listening to Marcus and Luke recording Lions Watch, which is going to be out, well, pretty much now, Thursday morning. You're going to be hearing this. And there was a lot of... I mean, I think it was hot in the studio. Luke was talking about getting Dan Burn on the plane. I think Luke was saying that Casemiro isn't good enough. There was all kinds of wild shouts. Andy, you need to get a hold of these lads because they've gone absolutely Lions Watch England crazy. So Reece James may be the safest shout we've got, even injured, even absolutely raging.
Well, if we're making wild shouts, can I throw in Christian Burgess of Union Saint-Gilloise? I mean, he's been nearly a Belgian champion last couple of seasons. And Luke will be on board because he was brilliant for Portsmouth as well. Danny Kelly recently suggested to me Alfie Doty of Luton to solve the left-back problem. Yeah. Look, listeners, just get your wild shouts in. We want to see him. We want to see him on the Discord.
Yeah. I mean, Tino could do a job, couldn't he? or somebody. I don't know. Tino
I thought you meant Asprilla for a minute.
he'd get involved. He'd do anything. All right, well, we'll get out of here. We've spoiled enough of your evening, morning, afternoon.
You've been watching a clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an upload. A single upload. Don't miss out on the uploads. The uploads are important.